Okay, Dave, how do you think about death?
I think it's inevitable for now. I don't fear death. I look forward to that because I think death is just a gateway to the next life. At least that's my belief.
And has it always been that way for you?
Yeah. I mean, I've always had a firm belief in God, even though as a kid I couldn't really learn much about God because most of the people in my family never went to church. They weren't really interested. I think it was my sister when I was really little told me about Jesus Christ and how he died on the cross for my sins. And I was overwhelmed by that. I didn't know we were going to get into a religious discussion, but sorry, I took it in that direction. I was overwhelmed by that just because the thought of somebody dying for me, giving up their life for me, was just, wow, it was overwhelming. So I wanted to know more about him, but I couldn't find anybody that would tell me anything about him. We had a Bible. It was like a King James version. It was this huge thing written in this old English. I couldn't make heads or tails out of any of it. I went to catechism because we were Catholic, asking nuns questions, and they had no patience for kids with questions about God. So I went a long roundabout way of learning about God through other religions first because I could find books on those, like reading about the Tao, the 𝐂𝐇𝐀𝐏𝐿. I'm trying to remember now because this is so long ago, but I ended up taking there's a course called The Great Books or The Great Courses. It's DVD series of college lectures of various anything you're interested in, really. Some of the best of college courses. I took many of those on like comparative religions. So I would follow some of those strictly on Islam, some that were on Hinduism, Judaism, and then Catholicism, Christianity, just doing the comparative stuff, trying to learn about all the religions, just to learn about God in general.
When I originally made the video about your whole routine and all that stuff, I remember I was looking at your reading list, which was like exhaustive, which was like, I was, number one, really impressed by how many books you read and or listened to, but then also like the diversity of topics and wide-ranging philosophy and perspective, and it was like really dynamic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that hasn't made a big impact in your philosophy when it comes to health as well.
Yeah, I think it has, because I like to borrow from all kinds of different things and bring them together as synergistic. I think that you can learn so many things outside of your own space, right? If you expand your horizons and try to learn things that you wouldn't normally be interested in, if that makes any sense. Yeah. That's helped me personally just to look at things in a different way than I would have otherwise.
What do you think most people get wrong when it comes to this whole like health, longevity, optimizing things? Because I feel that it's very easy to become very dogmatic and very siloed in a perspective.
Yeah, I think when it comes to man-made stuff, we arrogantly think that we know better than our creator that originally created us. And I feel funny saying that because I previously in my life, if I'd heard somebody else say that, I probably would have balked a little bit about it. But I think I'm more firm in that belief today. It just seems like every time we do a scientific advancement, like even in our food system, I mean, you look at how agriculture and fast foods and all these preservatives and things that we put in our food that were supposedly technological advancements have really come back to bite us. Right? All the processing we do for foods, we're now learning decades later how unhealthy all of that is. But back in the day, that was cutting edge technology, right? It was very exciting. People didn't have to spend hours in the kitchen preparing things from scratch anymore because you could just open a bag or a box, or a can and serve dinner, like shake and bake or whatever the product was of the day. And we just sort of lost a lot of that, like the things that our grandparents did as far as making their own food and eating clean. And so it just seems like the more technology that we put into things, I think we tend to take a step backward. Like 50%, they say, of the things that we think we know today to be true turn out to be completely wrong 5 or 10 years from now. Yeah. We just don't know what 50%.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I find that really interesting that you're saying that, because I think a lot of people would see you as like this biohacker, like guy who's utilizing all this technology and stuff like that. And, you know, I was like re-looking through some of these comments on the old video, and a lot of them were like, so many gadgets, so many, you know, like that was a lot of the critique. So how do you sort of rectify that for yourself?
Because I don't lose sight of what's really important. You know, going back to the basics and being very spiritualistic in my approach to things. But I mean, I don't shun technology, obviously. There's some great benefits to tech. We just don't know what which tech is the best for us and which is going to maybe impact us negatively in the future.
So let's talk about the fundamentals a little bit, and let's talk about, I'm curious for you, when did you start, like I know there was a nexus point for you to really start taking your health a lot more seriously. I know your parents got really sick. I know you were running marathons and you thought you were healthy, and then you kind of had this like wake up call. Can you talk to us about maybe that discovery moment for yourself where things sort of shifted?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, walk me through that.
We might have talked about this a little on the last podcast. I'm not sure. It's been so long since we spoke last.
Yeah.
It was around 2012, I believe. I was just turning 50. I was training for my first marathon. I was, you know, eating pretty healthy. I was tracking my sleep. I used to use one of those 𝐂𝐄𝐍𝐄 headband things that Dave Pascoe loves to talk about. So I mean, I was back in the day just like him, trying to do all the quantified self stuff that I could to learn every marker, like what was happening in my body. So obviously what you measure gets managed, right? So
yeah, what was driving that for you though? Because that's very, I feel like at that time that's very unique.
Yeah, that was very bleeding edge.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't know most of the people I know today in my life don't know anything about biohacking.
Yeah.
So way back then, that was just radical weirdness. Right?
Totally. Yeah, you're on the fringe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've kind of always been that way though, my whole life. I've considered myself to be an outsider. I was that way even from a little kid. I had tons of questions from my parents, and they had no patience whatsoever for questions. I was told that I was stupid, told to shut up. So I had terrible self-esteem because I really thought I was stupid. It was just, but it wasn't, my questions weren't actually stupid. They were deep. They were probably too deep for my age. And it was just annoying to my parents because, you know, asking them questions they don't have answers for themselves. It was just like, shut up, kid, get out of here. But again, I didn't know that. I thought it was a deficiency of mine. I thought everybody knew this stuff except for me. So it really made me just focus more on like, what's everybody doing? I tried to be more observant. Since I couldn't get direct answers from anybody on my questions, even like about God or whatever, I just had to watch what the smartest people seemed to be doing and try to model that. So, I mean, I've spoken on other podcasts about, like, for example, I would see people that were living more wealthy than we were. They'd have, you know, huge homes, big expensive cars, you know, great clothes. And, you know, we were modestly well off. I mean, we weren't rich, we weren't poor, we were sort of middle class. Yeah. Had the same things that all of my friends and neighbors had. But yet I would see these people that had more and people that had less and wondered, well, what are the people doing that have more? And why aren't we doing that? Now, of course, if you ask your parents that question, that's really insulting.
Yeah, it's very triggering.
Yeah, right. But I didn't know that as a kid. I didn't have that kind of awareness of how that would make them feel. So that's why you get the shut up kid, you know, those kind of answers. But yeah, I started noticing that those people were, you know, they were going to college, they were constantly learning, they were into self-improvement, you know, things that, you know, my parents had no interest in, and neither did any of the neighbors or, you know, the kids that I was growing up with. That was just foreign. That was weird. And so, but I was fascinated by, like, what are those people doing? Same thing with relationships. You know, I would see people that had just amazing relationships. After decades of marriage, they're still holding hands. They're still gazing into each other's eyes lovingly, you know, getting along like so well. And then I would see other couples that would just bicker, fight like cats and dogs. You know, it seemed like they hated each other. When one would talk, the other would roll their eyes. You know, it's just like, I definitely didn't want that kind of relationship. So I wanted to see what were the people doing that had the good relationships, the caring relationships. How could I have that in my life? And then, of course, when it came to age, watching people age, really, really some old people that were very vibrant, just like young, old people.
Yeah.
Super energetic. And then I'd see people half their age, or even a quarter their age. They were just all broken down, beaten up, like, wow, what the heck are they doing? Because I don't want to make that mistake. And, what are they doing? Because I definitely want to do that. So, yeah, I observed from the older people that were doing well how they were eating much cleaner food. They were always exercising. They were focusing on sleep. I mean, just the basics, the fundamentals.
Yeah.
The things that people are still preaching today as though it's something new and radical, right?
Yeah.
But it's been around for centuries.
How did that eventually weave into this moment in your 50s when you're thinking you're, doing well, you're tracking your things, you're running your marathons, but what was that moment for you where you're like, okay, this has got to shift?
Yeah, I think it might have been a Ben Greenfield blog at the time. I'm not even sure. Well, he might have been doing his podcast then. That I couldn't tell you. But I'm pretty sure it was through him that I heard about a test for a thing called telomeres, which were relatively new and nobody was speaking about. And I was fascinated to learn that those were, like the little aglets on the end of your shoelaces that keep the shoelace from unraveling. They're a marker in your DNA that shows where like one snip maybe starts, the other one stops. And as we get older, every time the cell divides, it gets shorter and shorter. I mean, I know you know this. I'm just telling this for the folks at home.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, I heard there's a test for it, and some people are surprised by how short theirs are, and others are, pleased by how long theirs are. I was confident that I was doing everything right. I was taking tons of supplements, didn't know why. Didn't know what they were doing for me.
Yeah.
But I would walk the aisles like in the health food store and go, oh yeah, that
I heard
good.
this. I heard this was good.
This is great.
Yeah.
Oh, this mineral? Sure. Oh, this herb? All right.
Yeah.
Again, I had no way to measure because there weren't any home tests that you could take back then. So I took this telomere test thinking that I was going to have the telomeres of like a 20-something-year-old. Well, I got the test results back and I was just horrified because at age 50, it said I had the telomeres of a 68-year-old.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? I mean, I thought I was doing everything right. I mean, obviously, I am missing something because on the outside, I'm physically fit. I feel good. I feel great. I'm running marathons for Pete's sake. I mean, how much better can you
get?
At 50? At 50,
yeah. Like, who's doing that?
Who's doing that? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Right? But I thought, obviously, I'm missing something at the cellular level. If my cells are saying they're much older.
And let's contextualize this. What are your telomeres at now? Like how old are you?
I've been working at them for quite a long time, since like 2012.
Yeah.
It took several years before there was even any technology for increasing telomeres. So through the research, like cancer research, they found that cancer cells produce their own enzyme that will increase their telomeres, and they never get short. So cancer cells can live to be immortal, right? Where our normal healthy cells have about 120-year lifespan.
Wow.
Right. And so what was the question?
So the question is, what are your telomeres now?
Oh, okay.
Or what's your age according to your telomeres?
Sorry, I was getting around that in a roundabout way, and I lost my way.
Yeah. So you've been working at it for a while now.
Yeah.
Where are you at now?
Okay. So once I got the telomerase activators and used those, I am now, depending on whose test you go by, I am roughly around to be like a 53-year-old.
Cool.
So that's 10 years younger than I am right now. I'll be 63 in August.
Yeah. Wow. So we just reversed aging, like according to these tests, which are very cutting edge. So take that with a grain of salt. And like I can imagine there's a big difference in how you feel if your cells are that much healthier, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
no, it made a big difference to my energy levels and things like that. Of course, it took other supplements to help even further that along. That came along much, much later.
What's the first thing that you started working on once you had this shift of realizing kind of where you were at and having like a come to Jesus moment, as it were? Like what's the first thing you're like, okay, this is what I'm focused on now that I know where I'm at?
Well, I ended up taking a consult with the company that did the telomere test because, I mean, they were supposedly the experts, so I wanted to know, like, okay, what can I do? Right? What should I be doing? What am I doing wrong? And they began by asking me questions about my lifestyle. Whereas, I knew the obvious. I knew about the sleep. I knew about the exercise. I knew about good nutrition. And so I started by telling them those things. And they're like, no, we want to know, like, what is your daily life like? What's like, what happens from the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed? And I thought that was really an odd question because I didn't understand where they were going with that. So I'm like, okay, I'll play along. And so I started to explain about my job. I had a really stressful job as a network security architect and engineer. And, we were protecting corporate networks. And if there was a breach of any kind, it was all hands on deck to try to lock everything down, figure out how the hacker, has gotten in, and what do we do to take care of that.
Yeah.
And then even doing upgrades on, firewalls and things. There would be times I would spend 36 hours at a stretch just working, trying to resolve an issue. Yeah. So incredibly stressful. Again, training for my first marathon, that's fairly stressful. I was doing P90X, if you're familiar with that workout. I've been doing that since it came out, like in the 90s. I've been doing other workouts since then, but I keep coming back to P90X because it seems to get me in the best shape of all of them. But that's pretty hardcore. It's a very extreme workout. And I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm also the sole caretaker for my two parents who are battling cancer. Mm-hmm. When my mom had her first cancer, my dad was able to take care of her. Then he got cancer, and she was able to take care of him. And then here in 2001, they were both down with cancer at the same time. And so I was there. I moved in with them from North Carolina to take care of them. And I took care of them until they passed in like 2018. Yeah, Dad passed in 2018 or 19. Mom passed in 2020.
Not even that long ago.
No, yeah, very recent. Wow. So they took care of me for the first 18 years of my life, and I got to take care of them for the last like 19 of theirs. So turned out it was fair play. But it's karma, right? I guess I owed that to them. Yeah. Again, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. What I really want to parse out in this interview is philosophy, ideology, principles, and like ways of thinking that younger people can apply to start thinking about these things in a different way. Like, I'm 31, I take really good care of myself. I've been on my health journey for a minute now. I've made tremendous progress, and like, I just don't know what I don't know because I don't know what's coming. You know what I mean? And so I don't know necessarily what's out there that I should be thinking about because I'm just not there, right? Okay. And you're there, right? Okay. So I think what I would love to know is, for someone who's trying to improve their health span, longevity, overall just like well-being, like living as long and healthy as they can while enjoying their life, because something that I really appreciate about you and your philosophy is that from what I learned and like read and researched was that you're not afraid to have a good time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right? And you're not, like, if you have a decision to make between like being perfectly optimized and having a good time with your friends, you're going to choose having a good time with your friends.
Yes.
Which I think is super underappreciated, and then also like just really admirable, because I think in this space it's very easy to become very rigid in your thinking and way of being, which I also think is also really fragile, and is actually at the detriment of your health, because being healthy is more than just taking the supplements and going to bed at the right time, right? Has a lot to do with your spirit and your community and your purpose and all these other things. So I want to back into that conversation, starting with like, where does someone start when thinking about, okay, I want to play this long game of health. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
Obviously fundamentals, like let's lock that in, but what are the nuances and sort of things that we should be thinking about if we want to play this long-term game of health?
Yeah. Wow, great question.
Yeah.
Bryan Johnson likes to talk about thought experiments, but his tend to be around AI and things that seem a little strange to me. Mm-hmm. I like to do thought experiments about like, what am I going to be like in the future? Like, try to picture myself as an older person. What do I want my capabilities to be? And what do I have to do today to make sure that I get there? And then the sort of roundabout answer to your question, I have to backtrack a little bit and finish the answer to the last question, was through that consult, they said, look, you're killing yourself with stress, right? You're just going from one stress to the next stress to the next stress. That's what's shortening your telomeres. because they've seen that happen with like type A personalities that have like real stressful jobs, much shorter telomeres. They see it with endurance athletes, especially triathletes, doing all that activity, like too much activity, and it burns out your telomeres. They've seen it with caretakers of elderly parents, and they're like, you have the trifecta going.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what can I do? And they said, well, you should focus on things like yoga and meditation. And that made me laugh because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I used to do yoga and meditation all the time. But because of work and training and taking care of the parents, life got in the way.
Yeah.
And I forgot what used to be important to me, right? Of taking care of self-care, taking care of myself. So I had to focus more on doing those kind of things and more of a mental set of, like when I was doing run training, I hated running. Like the fact that I was training for a marathon, ridiculous, because I suck at running. I hated running. It was a chore. And I looked at it that way, which was not a good mindset.
It makes it even more stressful than it already is.
It does.
Yeah, okay.
I was only doing it for charity because we were raising money for Team World Vision. We're trying to like build wells to bring water to Africa because, you know, children, like thousands of kids die every day before the age of 5 over there due to the bacteria in the water they're drinking, all that. So I keep taking myself down these rabbit holes.
No. I mean, what I'm hearing is basically stress.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And changing my mindset about running.
Yeah.
It's not, I have to run. It's I get to run.
Yeah.
So like running by a hospital and looking up at the hospital rooms and thinking, I can imagine myself, thought experiment. I am stuck in a hospital bed somewhere. I'm looking out this window and seeing this guy that gets to run and wishing that I could be that
guy.
person.
Yeah.
And thinking how blessed I am that I am that person, you know, and so why don't I believe that I am blessed and be grateful for this opportunity? And that completely changed my thought about running.
Yeah.
It wasn't a chore anymore. It was a gift.
And wow, I just got goosebumps when you said that. And I imagine that that translates into everything else, not just running.
Absolutely. Gratitude is huge.
Yeah.
And so I know, like, you asked me what would someone younger today do? The first thing is, I know, many of us, and, you guys probably more than me because I'm retired now, are really out there just hustling. You're struggling. You're trying to make the dollar, right? Everybody wants to be the next billionaire with the next great idea, and be massively wealthy. But in the meantime, you have to put in your dues, and you're doing a lot of struggling, putting yourself under a lot of stress, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting your own company. You're working like crazy hours. You're just running yourself ragged. You got to give yourself some grace. You got to really focus on the mind control about not to stress out over those things so much.
Yeah. What's your mental dialogue around that kind of stuff?
Well, again, it's like you mentioned before. If I had the choice between having to do like a workout or a sauna session or going out with friends, I do that mind experiment again, where I'm fast forwarding to my deathbed, and I'm lying in my deathbed, and I'm thinking back on my life, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, if only I had blown off that time with my friends and done that one more sauna session, If only I'd done one more workout, how much better I'd be right now. No, you're not going to have that thought. Your thought is going to be, I squandered that time sitting in the sauna when I blew off being with people I care about, and making those connections. Because in the end, it's the people that you meet and the connections that you make that are really the most important. Those are the things you're going to remember. I'm getting emotional just talking about this.
Yeah.
But those are the things that are really important, the things that matter. When you're young and you're hustling and you got a family, again, I'm going to try not to tear up over this, but it's important to try not to forget about your family and your kids. So many kids feel like they don't even know their father, right? Because the father thinks he's doing the best he can for the family by putting in all those hours and being the breadwinner and bringing the money home. But yet he's giving up the relationship with the kids when they're younger, and then regret the fact that now they're older and they don't have the relationship and they don't know how to get it back. It's tragic, really.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking about this in the context of just like I feel like relationships are like the juice of life, and like being a part of a healthy family and also contributing to your community and also being a role model and like these things, like they fill the health bucket in a way that can't exactly be quantified or measured.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like the biochemical stuff that happens as a byproduct of that, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'm sure it's really good.
Yep.
You know, like the oxytocin and the
Sure.
and like the serotonin and all the parasympathetic and like all this stuff that happens like as just a byproduct of, you know, breaking bread, metaphorically sharing some good food with some
Studies
good people.
Of blue zone show community is really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I just really like that that's the conversation that we're having. And, you know, we just came from this event where it's always like, you know, this and that and, this marker and
gadgets.
Yes. And I feel like, you know, coming from you specifically though, I think this actually carries a lot more weight because you're steeped in this like rhetoric and experimentation and application of these tools and the metrics and all this stuff. So to hear you talk about this and have it move you in such a way, I think is really worth noting and is also super profound.
But for me, that's just like a side thing that I'm doing. It's not the important thing that I'm doing.
Which is crazy because I think a lot of people would look at what you do and say like, wow, you don't have a life. Like you're, you know, I can see, I can hear the YouTube comments.
Oh, sure,
like,
sure. It's like, oh yeah, the rich guy, sure. He's retired, he gets to sit around and biohack all day. Oh, boo-hoo.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I've seen the comments. Too. Yeah. Yeah. But for me, it's not like that at all. My focus is on, you know, being out with friends, going and doing things. I live in Michigan, so warm weather only happens like for a few months out of the year.
Yeah.
So when the warm weather hits, I don't want to be inside really doing biohacking. I want to be out. We've got festivals that are happening. We've got concerts that are coming up. I mean, just being with friends in the evening is gold.
How much time do you think you spend on your health in any given day? Like on a normal day, average day, when you're not traveling and stuff like that?
Great question. It's more so in the winter because I'm already locked inside anyway.
Yeah.
So that's when I'm actually doing more heads down cerebral stuff too. I might be working on spreadsheets of my biomarkers and trying to do tracking of things. And then, of course, during the warmer weather, like now it's run season again. I have a half marathon to do in October, so I should be starting my run training now for that. So much more physically active now that the warmer weather is here. Yeah. So it really depends on the time of year and if I have an event to train for.
Because I think people get this mental image. I know people probably think this of me sometimes too. It's like, your whole day is like a big morning routine and you're doing this thing and this intervention and this, you know, it's like.
It could turn out that way.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do, I'm not always successful, but in many ways I have been, it's that I try to systematize and automate these processes, these biohacking processes in my routines so that I don't have to think about them. They just become habitual.
Yeah.
So I'm not wasting mental energy on thinking, oh yeah, I got to take this supplement. I have to go do this particular exercise or do this. I have to tongue scrape now, you know, like the whole checklist of all the biohacking stuff, right? If I had to go through that every day and mentally think about all those, I'd be exhausted just from that alone. And no, I try to automate that stuff to where I don't think about it. It doesn't waste any of my mental space. I'm free to think about more important things or bigger picture things.
Yeah, it becomes more of a lifestyle. And I think something I've been really kind of like focused on and learning a lot about is behavior change and like identity work. And I imagine the version of you that does what you do now and is performing at the level that you're performing and has the results that you have now is probably different than who you were when you were 50.
Oh yeah, sure.
So how did you start to make that identity change to become this person who has these results?
Interesting. Yeah, because I didn't always intend to be in any kind of public spotlight, definitely. I was just doing what I was doing just to satisfy myself, not to prove anything to anyone.
Yeah.
Although it was proving to myself that even though I would try to talk to friends about health and fitness and taking care of ourselves and that my personal belief is that what we have come to accept as natural aging really isn't natural at all. It's just the accumulation of, you know, just poor practices or the lack of putting effort in as we get older. I found that if I keep pushing and working harder as I get older, I'm improving. I'm better than I was when I was 30. And I keep getting better every day because I keep trying. It's harder now as I get older, right? But if I keep working at it, I can continue to stay fit. I'm beating my running times each time. Every time I do an event, my scores are better than the years before. It's just a constant learning and growing and improving.
I think that's pretty wild to hear, because I think a lot of people just, I mean, you hear it all the time. It's like, I'm just getting older, or, you know, that's just what happens as you get older, right?
It's a belief. It's a limiting belief.
Yeah,
it's
so
not true.
I want to dig into this and like specifically get into the beliefs that you have that allow you to create these results. So you just said one, which is that what we think as normal aging is not normal at all. What are some of the other beliefs that you have that sort of form this and shape this identity that you have now?
Well, I mean, this whole experience is changing me a lot. I still have a bit of a fear of public speaking, and the fact that through most of my life, I felt like nobody wanted to hear from me, right? Again, as a child, I was always told to shut up and go away. My parents appreciated a child that didn't speak. Like, if you're seen but not heard, that's
a good
ideal.
thing.
Yeah. And so even like through most of my life, I just didn't think people were that interested. I was more of a wallflower, and so I wasn't really like out and talking with people about things, especially about biohacking stuff. Yeah. Nobody was interested.
Yeah.
Like even my friends today, when I try to talk to them about this stuff, you know, the eyes kind of glaze over.
I had that experience too. Even living in California and like being in San Diego, when I started doing this stuff, I felt very isolated. Yeah. You know, I was the weird guy.
Right.
Puts on the blue light blocking glasses and has the weird lights everywhere.
People
and
are snickering.
Yeah, taking the supplements and like doing the breath work and like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely a weird guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I hid all that. Mm-hmm. So most of my friends didn't see any of that stuff. That was stuff I did at home privately because I was sort of embarrassed by it.
Living a double life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I knew it was beneficial, but I'm like, I'm not advertising that just because I'm going to get ripped on mercilessly.
Yeah.
So,
so what are these other beliefs that allow you to be so fit and healthy and continue to push and make gains as you get older, where most people are sort of declining? Because that's specifically what I want to dig into. Not necessarily the public speaking stuff and like the personal brand stuff, but like more just on the tune of the health and like how do you maintain and continue to improve? Because the beliefs are what shape the behavior. And the behavior is what creates the results.
Again, through the observing of other people. Like, for instance, as our grandparents get older, you will see well-meaning sons and daughters of those grandparents, like your parents, thinking that, okay, you know, grandma or grandpa, they're getting up there in age. We probably shouldn't be leaving them alone at home anymore. It's time for them to sell the house, maybe move in with us, right? That's usually the belief that people start having. And it's valuable, especially if that person might be suffering from dementia. Now that might be necessary. But what typically happens that I've seen is when grandma or grandpa stop managing their home and taking care of their lawn and just doing their dishes and having a purpose, right? They come live with you, and now they're just sitting in a chair and they're watching television all day.
Yep.
And they're not physically active. And sitting is the new smoking, as they say, right? If you're just sitting there and you're not moving your muscles, you're not moving your interstitial waste. Because let's face it, your cells, when they do their biological processes, they have excrement just like we do, right? So their waste gets exerted out of their cellular membrane into that interstitial fluid that's around them, and that builds up in our lymphatic system. Yeah. The only thing that moves the lymphatic system is either massage or muscle movement.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting stagnant, working at your computer all day long for 8 hours a day, you're basically stewing in your own cellular waste because it's not getting moved.
Yeah.
It's not getting eliminated.
Yeah.
So you really have to look at moving your muscles, all of your muscles in your body every day to get that fluid and stuff to move through your system and get excreted.
What are some of the things that have made the biggest difference for you since, I guess, becoming more aware of like what the situation was, thinking that you were doing really well, but realizing that there's a lot more to go?
Well, I started seeing, like, in doing P90X workouts, I started seeing that it was taking me longer than the hour or hour and a half to get through the hour or hour and a half workout. And then, I started thinking, well, okay, I am getting older, right? And I heard myself say that, and I thought, well, that's an excuse. It might be true, but there's got to be something I can do about this. There's got to be a reason why this is happening. I had no answer to that because I'm not a doctor. I'm not, like, into cellular biology, but I was lucky enough to hear a podcast. This was probably in my mid-50s when I started noticing that this particular issue. And I heard about a product called nicotinamide riboside.
Yep.
So Chromadex produced a product called True Niagen at the time. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And the fact that our body uses NAD, or nicotinamide adenosine dinucleotide, I think that is, if I can remember what that stands for.
Okay.
Which helps our cells and the mitochondria and the mitochondrial transport chain produce ATP, which is the energy that our body runs on. Adenosine triphosphate, I think that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for checking me, because I wasn't positive.
Yeah.
And I hate when I say something wrong on a podcast. I'm always embarrassed by that later. They talked about the fact that as we get older, we don't produce as much NAD, and we don't produce as much ATP.
Got it.
So this product was supposed to help as a precursor to NAD, and I thought, well, I'm a skeptic. I think everything's bullshit when I hear about it. So I'm going to try this just to see if it works. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but I'll try it. And I bought it, and it came in, and I took it for the first couple of days. I mean, I didn't feel any different in my normal day-to-day, so I was thinking it was a bust, like complete waste of money. But when I did my P90X workout that third day, I felt amazing. I mean, I burned through the P90X workout in the allotted time, had tons of energy left over. And I thought, wait a minute, this has not happened in a long time. So I did a whole nother hour and a half workout right after that because I wanted to see where the bottom drops out. And I still had energy left over.
Wow.
I'm thinking, okay, this is amazing. I really did have this issue. It's real.
Yeah.
And now this is my saving grace supplement to help restore that. And I've been taking that ever since. And that's made a big difference to my energy level.
What do you think, if you were to go back in time to your 30s, for example, what would you start doing in your 30s to set yourself up for, your 60s or 70s or 80s?
Well, in my 30s, I ended up taking a big kind of step backward in my health and fitness.
Yeah, so if you could go back in time and redo it,
Yeah.
what would you focus on?
Well, I wasn't eating good. So I was eating pretty crappy. I wasn't sleeping well. I remember there were times that I would be up late most all the time and have to get up very early to go to work.
Yeah.
And there were times driving to work that I would be nodding,
Oh, wow.
driving, and hitting curbs and stuff, which would always scare the snot out of me. Cranking the radio up loud, having the windows down in the winter, digging the nails into my legs to try to stay awake so I could get to work or home from work without falling asleep. So just a whole step backward from where I used to be and where I am today. And so, and I noticed my body was breaking down. Like at age 30, I thought I was old. I thought I was at the basically end of my life.
Wow.
I am useless. I'm breaking down. I'm not attractive. I'm never going to find a mate. All these negative, self-limiting beliefs. But because I felt so crappy and I was starting to look crappy, even though I was still in good shape, definitely not in the shape that I am today.
Yeah.
I was heavier, kind of like the Bryan Johnson before pictures.
Yeah.
That was
you were
me.
puffy, you were not feeling lethargic,
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, just dragging through my day.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I knew then what I know today,
Yeah.
I would have been eating, much cleaner, right?
Yeah.
I would have gotten rid of all processed foods.
Yeah.
Of course, nobody knew that back then,
Totally.
that was really an issue that came much later in progress. But we know that today.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse for anyone today to be eating all the fast foods and the processed foods if they're really trying to take care of themselves and live a long, healthy life.
Yeah.
And sleep, right? When you think about the fact that sleep is when your brain and your body does all of its repair and rejuvenation.
Yeah.
If you're cutting yourself short of that, then you're shorting your body of being able to repair itself. and stay young longer. And I was unwittingly doing that because I had that mindset, like so many others, that I'll sleep when I die, you know, or I'm just too much of a hard charger. I don't have time for sleep, you know, just the macho, you know, mindset, which was terrible.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to break that mold.
I think it's happening.
It is.
I think people are waking up, no pun intended, to how important it is, and it has a lot to do with trackers and people just having awareness of like, oh yeah, I do this thing, it makes me feel this way, I get XYZ score, me no like, me change behavior. You know what I mean? So it's kind of happening automatically, I think, culturally wide. But
We're so incredibly blessed that we have this at this point in our lives.
Oh yeah, man, it's happening, man.
Because 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, I did not have the benefit of any of this.
Yeah, so I think something, you know, in the same vein, it's like, okay, other than just the basics, like, hey, I'm going to eat real food. I'm going to have a consistent bedtime and wake time. Is there any like underlying like lifestyle things or mindsets or tests or just things to be thinking about for the long term that, you know, 30-year-old version of Dave should have been thinking about now, like in this time frame, right?
Yeah.
So like you have access to all the same stuff. Let's just say you're giving advice to me.
Okay.
Kyle, you're pretty dialed, you're eating clean, you're sleeping well, 95 sleep score most nights.
Yeah, you're probably not out partying and drinking heavy.
No, but I have a good time, have a great social life, I have a great community. I feel really juiced up by my work, I'm not stressed. Life is pretty good. And like it can be better, and I still have things that I'm working on and stuff like that. And like I said before, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, so like, how do I set myself up for success for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 decades?
Okay, so you're assuming like all of the basics are already dialed in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. That's when you can start really looking at next level tools and supplements, right? Because if you got your nutrition dialed in, you're probably getting maximum nutritional density, like hopefully.
Yeah.
But our food system is kind of limited too, that we can't necessarily get the nutrients that we
can't get all of
30
it
years ago with our food today. Yeah. So there is some supplementation that's required. So looking at the right supplements, understanding why you're taking the supplements, that was like a mistake I used to make, not being able to measure what the supplements are doing. Like for me now that I'm able to blood test, I blood test every month.
Wow.
I do like the CBC, the CMP, and then every quarter I'm doing the hormones and lipids.
How much does that cost?
Oh, it can cost a lot.
Yeah.
The basic CBC and CMP are fairly inexpensive. You can get that with vitamin D, I think, for like $75.
How much do you spend on testing every month?
Oh, a fortune, because
like how much?
That's
like,
my biggest expenditure.
Is it
People
really?
think it's the supplements. No, it's actually the testing that costs me the most.
Yeah, I remember when I did the video, it's like every quarter you're doing like vitamin and mineral stuff. Every year you're doing like hair mineral analysis. Do you think those tests are accurate? Do you think those are like relevant? Like, do you actually think they're good tests?
Yeah. They've shown me some things that I was not aware of, like the hair tissue mineral analysis, right? It shows you what's accumulating in your tissue.
Yeah.
That's really important, especially when it comes to like toxic elements.
How do you know it's legit, like these tests?
Well,
which is a really important.
I don't know that about any test, to be honest. Even blood tests, I couldn't tell you they're legit. I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
But I mean, like, because something that I appreciate about you is that you take a high degree of responsibility for your own personal health, and that's a big part of your philosophy. And so with that comes this level of like, I guess, you have to be your own detective in a way, and you also have to get a really good like sniff radar, right? Of like, what is actually worth my time, energy, and can I actually validate some of these things that I'm making assumptions on and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like, what's your discernment process for like deciding, okay, I'm going to allocate resources to this, and I have a high believability that this is something I should invest in.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Great question. Yeah. So I've done like, I don't want to throw Viome under the bus, but I've done them and other microbiome kind of tests.
Yeah.
And they're so inconsistent.
Completely.
Yeah,
even the best ones.
Yeah, I can't make heads or tails out of them. They don't make any sense to me.
Yep.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Yep.
Whereas if, like my blood markers, for example, they do have a discernible pattern. Yep. So I know they're not just random data. Right?
Yeah.
And the same with the hair tissue mineral analysis.
Okay.
There's actually a trend to that. Like I saw at one point my calcium was way, way too high.
Yeah.
And that came from the mistaken impression because of marketing that everybody's deficient in calcium. So you need milk to build strong bones. And everybody used to supplement with calcium because of an osteoporosis issue, right? Yeah. And so I was taking a calcium supplement, which I did not need because I was already eating lots of green leafy vegetables that were high in calcium, eating lots of nuts and seeds that had calcium. So taking a calcium supplement was just ridiculous. It was completely unnecessary. But I didn't know that because when I would test blood calcium, it was always fine. It was always in the right range. But accumulating in the tissues only showed up in the hair tissue mineral analysis. Yeah. Now, for most people, you would think, well, calcium, no big deal. It's water soluble. You just pee it out, right? No, it does. It accumulates in your joints.
Oh, yeah, it can be really bad.
And in your heart. Yep. You get a calcified heart. That's a huge issue.
Yep.
That led me to go see my cardiologist and get a coronary calcium CT score, just because I wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up, my vascular system by all this extra calcium. Thankfully, I had not. If I hadn't done the hair tissue mineral analysis and realized I had a problem with calcium, I would have continued taking the calcium.
Maybe
and I would have had a problem down the road.
Yep. How do you navigate all this stuff without being becoming like a nervous wreck? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't really stress over it. I mean, especially when it comes to like the True Diagnostic, the Rejuvenation Olympics competition, right? I don't know if listeners know, like in 20...
There's a leaderboard where everyone's measuring their telomeres and how quickly they're aging and stuff like that, and it's a big competition, and it's fun, and it's like it's like a cool thing.
Bryan Johnson started the competition.
Yeah, he
was number one on his own leaderboard when he first started it. He assumed he was
the best,
better than anyone in the world.
But Dave beat him.
And still loves to say that he is, right? Yeah. And so when the competition came out, I didn't even know there was a competition. I'd already been using True Diagnostic for several years.
Oh, yeah, that's how I found you.
Oh, okay.
Was on the leaderboard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I had no idea there was a competition. I was just using them anyway, just as one more test to validate that what I was doing was putting me on the right track. Yeah. And then this watch is like making a humming noise, so I want to keep it away from the mic. Anyway, it was just one more test, right? And I got my results back, and I got an email at the same time. This was my third epigenetic age test, about 6 months apart. When I got an email from True Diagnostic, I thought it was about my tests, and it was just a marketing email about this new competition that was out. And so I thought, oh, how awesome. And I saw this guy on the number one on the leaderboard, and I'm looking at his score. I'm thinking, wait a minute, that looked like mine. And I'm like looking at mine and looking at his. I'm like, wait, is this right? Am I beating this billionaire? Can that be right? And I'm thinking, no, I've got to be misinterpreting this. There's no way I'm beating this guy, right? Or maybe I am. And are they going to allow me to beat this billionaire? Because this is his own competition. Yeah. Right? I didn't know. So I submitted my results. About a month and a half later, they updated the leaderboard. He moved down from number 1 to number 7, and I was number 6. Mm-hmm. And we stayed that way for all of 2023. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's how then people started to find me, and newspaper articles started coming up and podcasts, and it just kind of blew up from there. Everybody wanted to know, who is this nobody who's obviously not a millionaire and not spending $2 million a year, who's beating the guy who is. Yeah. So that was fun, totally unexpected. It was right about the time that I retired, so
right place, right time.
A whole new career, right, that I didn't even believe that I was going to have. Never dreamed of it. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No. Actually, I want to go back to the question of, what advice would you give me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We went down another train, but I think this is it's not really about me. It's more about people like me. You know, it's about the generation that I really serve and speak to. Yeah.
So testing, very important, right? Because that's what we started talking about. Test. Don't guess. Right? Don't just take supplements because you think you need them. I know most people your age are starting to take NMN and NR, you may not even need it. That may be a complete waste of your money.
Yeah.
So taking a test from like Ginfinity has an NAD test. Do Not Age has one of those. Test and see where you are, right? Like right now, I'm taking like just 300 milligrams of NR. They have a 1,000 milligram product that's out. There's no reason for me to take the 1,000 milligram because I've tested and I see that I'm in the optimal range. I'm at the lower end of optimal, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
So I don't need the 1,000 milligram.
Are there any big tests that you think people like? They're like hallmark tests. That's like, hey, like if you want to be healthy for a long time, you should consider getting these.
So the basic blood panels, the CMP, the CBC, those are better than what your doctor is going to run. Those are going to tell you most everything that you need to know. And your vitamin D status, you may have to add that in. And then, like I said, it's like $7,500 depending on where you're buying it from.
7,500.
I mean, 75 to 100.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did say that funny.
What do you think about function? Have you seen Function Health? Yeah.
I am vaguely familiar with them.
Yeah.
They know they offer like lots and lots of tests.
Yeah. It's pretty comprehensive.
I'm using Life Extension myself or Ultra Labs. So I did compare the prices. They seem reasonable with Function Health, so I don't have any issue with them at all. That'd be a really good avenue to take for someone. Yeah. But then also spending a bit more to get the hormones tested. Yep. Once you add the full hormone panel, like I'll do the Male Elite panel through Life Extension, and that's about like on a sale it's about $430. When it's not on sale, it's around like $550. That type of price range. So it's a bit pricey to run that, like every quarter. It's really important to know what your hormone status is.
Yes.
Like not just your testosterone, but knowing like what's your estrogen, what's your estradiol,
DHEA,
what's your pregnenolone.
Sex binding globulin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, free T, all that.
Absolutely. All of that is very important to know. Yeah. And then doing some supplementation from there to move those markers.
Or lifestyle interventions.
Or lifestyle, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, because you said you've already got the sleep, and you've already got the exercise, and you've already got the diet optimized, so I'm assuming you're already doing those basics.
Yeah, I am. And, but sometimes, the lifestyle thing that you might be doing might be good for you in certain situations, but maybe be at the detriment of some other things, right? So depending on what your results say, you might need to make some adjustments. Like, for example, if you're cold plunging all the time, right, but like your cortisol's all messed up, or you're having issues with your adrenals, then that might not be appropriate for you. But you might not know that because you're just blunting how you feel with a surge of dopamine and,
So even healthy things in excess become unhealthy.
Totally. Or just context dependent, right? Like it's just very nuanced.
Because every body is different.
And every body is also different at different times of life,
Exactly. And so women probably should not be listening to men biohackers about what they should do. They should be listening to a female biohacker.
Yes.
Because we know from our own experimentation what works for us, but that's not necessarily going to translate to them.
Totally. And I also just wanted to note, on this interview too, is that I actually picked up meditation again after making that video about your routines and stuff.
I love it.
Because I had been meditating for, I think close to 7 years, but I had stopped. I had fallen out of the practice.
Life gets in the way.
Life gets in the way, and I went through a really stressful time, and I was like, oh, this is my sign. And I started connecting more to my faith as well. Cool. After and that's not something that was ever really that present. I was raised Jewish, and I started moving more in that direction of just I'm gonna go do some Shabbats. And I'm going to go start reading a little bit more and getting into that a little bit more. So I just want to say thank you for that, because the way in which I put the story together and made the video, I always learned so much for myself through making these videos.
Well, your video was excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I think I've meditated close to 300 days in a row. Basically since making that video.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, 30 minutes every day in the morning. And
you expanded your community too through your faith?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to an event at the beginning of the month. That's a big community event.
Oh man, I'm so proud of you. You're doing all the right stuff.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I think we're coming up on time, so I'm just going to slide in a couple more questions.
Sure. I hope I answered the questions you already asked me, because I keep sidetracking.
Well, I think the big thing I took away from that last one is really just testing, investing heavily in testing,
Yeah.
And just getting the full panels, even though they're more expensive, because then the protocols that you do put in place are going to be way more targeted and specific and appropriate.
Yeah, the test is like a roadmap, right? You don't know where you're going unless you know where you are to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I am a huge advocate for testing. I think everyone should do more testing. You'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run. And, you know, we didn't really talk about it much, but maybe we could talk about it a little bit. Like, I know I have personally made some big mistakes.
Oh, sure, me too.
From not really knowing what I'm working with or what my situation is or what I actually need in that moment. And something that we could talk about specifically, and it's a nice dovetail into a question for you, which is like for me, when I got really sick with COVID and I was dealing with a lot of autoimmune issues, I had to go on a low carbohydrate diet. No one ever told me that when you go on a low carb diet that you're going to need to increase your salt intake.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so I remember feeling really horrible. Like it was like it stabilized me. The diet like stabilized me and helped like neutralize some of the things that were going on. And like there was other issues that showed up as a byproduct of me being super low carb.
Oh, yeah.
And then as soon as I put electrolytes back into my like supplementation, I didn't even know that I had never supplemented with electrolytes before. So I put them in and it was like I came back to life and I was like, oh, I think I really missed the mark on this one.
Yeah. Multiple things actually happen when you adopt like a keto lifestyle or low carb. You'll go through what they call the keto flu to start with.
Yes.
Right. And that's because your body now, what used to be carb adapted, is still looking for those carbs and not getting it.
Yes.
Right? And now it's starting to have to become fat adapted, which is a difficult transition.
Yes.
And you begin then using up your own body fat, which helps you to get much more lean and ripped, which is a nice side effect. But in that process, like when your body is, and when it encounters like toxins, maybe heavy metals, it can't always flush everything. So what it doesn't know what to do with, it sequesters in fat tissue.
Oh, man.
So then when you start going through this ketosis, you know, from a lower carb diet, and you're burning this fat now, you're releasing these toxins that you've built up over the years. And that's now in your system. It makes you feel like garbage until you can clear those toxins. So to some folks doing it for the very first time, I would recommend taking some binders along with that. So you're binding these things up and they're not just circulating through your system, and it helps you to eliminate them through, you know, feces and urine.
How many grams of carbohydrates do you eat on a normal
honestly,
day?
I don't measure. I don't have any idea about calories or.
But you say that you're on like a lower carbohydrate diet.
Meaning like I don't do bread at all. I don't do pasta.
Yeah.
I've had to add.
But like sweet potatoes, rice.
I've had to add those back in.
Do you eat that with most of your meals?
I do now, yeah.
Like breakfast, lunch, dinner?
Yeah. I didn't used to. I mean, I pretty much eliminated all that stuff, and I got so lean, and then when I would try to run, I was just burning muscle. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask you. Is like how do you balance that with like your training, with putting on muscle or maintaining muscle? Because for me, in my experience, it's like I really need the carbohydrates to train. You know, like I found that, you know, if I'm trying to build muscle, because that's one of the main drivers for health and longevity, right? I need to eat the carbs. I can't just have like a protein and veggies. Like it doesn't, I can put on some, but only so much, you know? Yeah. And then from a recovery standpoint and from just like a brain output, I need the fuel as well. You know, so I was really curious because I knew when I was doing the research for your video that you were on a similar type of diet. So I was just curious how you were maintaining that or working around that.
For a while, I wasn't maintaining it very well.
Yeah.
So when I was doing like the long miles of marathon training, oh my gosh, I would just burn so much muscle.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting older, it gets so much harder to put that muscle back on.
Yeah.
So I would go through these periods of bulking up over the winter and then slimming back down or stripping it all back off again during the summertime, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you want to go through some periods of mTOR where you're building and other periods of autophagy where you are doing tearing down. It's more ancestral because it matches more of like, you know, basically what we used to be like, where we would fatten up for winter and then we would lean out maybe.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
All through winter. Yeah.
How do you balance the rigidity with adventure and spontaneity? Because I feel like the deeper you go into this type of lifestyle, the easier it is to have so many rules.
Yeah. Well, when I was working, it was actually more easier for me to be disciplined because I was working from home.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I negotiated with the job that I had at the time when I moved back to Michigan to take care of my parents, because I had to be there physically to take care of them. And so working from home, it was easy because I didn't really have all the hours I had to put in driving to get there, right? But things had to be very regimented. I had to be, starting work for conference calls at this time or this time. But in between those conference calls, then I could squeeze in a workout, do like exercise snacks. So instead of like just doing one big P90X workout, I might do the first couple, reps of something before the conference call. I do the next couple after the conference call. I could split it up and work it all in throughout the day, or grab a sauna session somewhere in between there. Or I just had to be creative about like what my time slots looked like and what I could fill that with. But once I retired and I didn't have the limitations of having to start and stop at a very specific time at work, it's actually made it more challenging for me to have that free-floating time to dedicate to doing these particular things. So now there's some mornings where I'll do the workout first thing, and other times I won't do it until maybe 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Maybe that's better though.
Yeah.
It
is. It suits the lifestyle.
It's more like fluid and it has more adaptability, right?
Yeah. Then I can go out and do something with friends if it pops up, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be really cool to like kind of circle back to the conversation that we were having in the car, just around like energy and emotion and stuff like that, because I'm making assumptions here, right? Like this is my perspective, but I feel like a lot of people could perceive you as some, engineer, like very cerebral, analytical, like you have your spreadsheets, you're very like dialed with your systems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like you were also a massage therapist, and we were talking about energy work and like how things are stored in the body and stuff like that. What's been your experience with that as it relates to you becoming healthier as you've gotten older?
That was a big influence, really. It was one of the things when I was in North Carolina planning to come back to Michigan and deciding on what I wanted my life to be like when I was going to come back and take care of my folks. I had some breathing room, right, because I was laid off from my job, and everything just lined up perfectly. And I thought, okay, this is my opportunity to not just go with the flow, not just let life happen to me, but what do I want to choose for life from this point going forward? And one was, as soon as I moved back, I wanted to find a good church, because I was not a churchgoer. I was not an attender at that time. But I had a friend that was what I called religious at the time. He used to go to church, and he could, quote Bible scriptures to me, and I'm like, I wasn't all that into it. But I knew that he would be able to find me a good church when I came back. So there was that, and also my big plan was to start massage school, and so I did. As soon as I moved back and got settled in with the folks, I enrolled in massage school. Best year of my life. I was just so relaxed because we're trading off massages with other students. I was learning like the anatomy and the physiology courses. So learning a ton about the body structure, how the bones go together, the tendons, the ligaments, how all the organ systems function. Things like I had some of that in high school, but this was a super deep dive because we had to use that knowledge to pass a certification exam, at the end to be nationally certified as a massage therapist.
Yeah.
And so I really had to take it seriously, like it was a deep college course. But I studied things there in massage school that would have seemed a little odd to me as an engineer. And I have to go back. Even in college, I explored all kinds of like woo-woo, alternative, energy type stuff. There's
more mystical things.
More mystical things, yeah. You want to understand more of that side of life. There's a guy by the name of Carlos Castaneda. He has a series of books about a character named Don Juan DeMarco.
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, there's like at least 10 or 12 books in the series. He's a Yaqui Indian sorcerer. So of all the various religions and things that I was learning about, to learn about God, Yaqui Indian sorcery was also one of those things that I included in there.
Fascinating.
I wanted to know what...
You got range, man.
Yeah, I wanted to know what American Indians, thought about God, Spanish Indians, like all cultures. How did they perceive God? Who is God to them? What did he want from us? What were their rules they lived by? And trying to find the synergies between all those religions. Because I thought the truth must be somewhere amongst all of those.
Yeah, there's got to be like a through line.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And of course there were huge, dissimilarities between all of them, but there was a lot of synergy between them. And where they mostly all agreed, I knew that's the gold, that's the magic. That's what I should be paying attention to. But going through this, Don Juan stuff, even in college, I was doing the belief in those books is that we are an energy field. We have an egg-shaped shell of energy, of different layers, and there's different colors and vibrations, frequencies, intensities about them as they expand. And the more advanced, the more like electrically charged, I guess the only word I can think of, that a person was, the more powerful they were energetically, the more their shell extended past their physical body.
Yeah, their field gets bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I would do intentional work with that on my energy field, trying to feel, comprehend. Some of that was really out there. It was difficult for me to wrap my brain around. And I wasn't really sure I believed it, but always being a skeptic, I doubted it, but I put it to the test anyway.
And what did you discover?
So I'm almost embarrassed to tell people this story because now that I look back on it, it sounds like I made it up, but I swear this is true. When I was at Michigan State University, I would spend my summers there also. I didn't come home. I worked maintenance and security through the summers to help pay for my education. And I would have times where I would go sit by the Red Cedar River and I would watch just the river flowing, and I would just try to just tune in with the energy of the water, because water is believed in many cultures to have very high energy.
Yeah.
And so I would tune in with the water as it was flowing, and I would focus in on a leaf that I might find, or anything that I'd find floating on the water. And most of it would be carried with the current. And one of the things in one of the books about Carlos Castaneda was that we have this silver thread that comes out of the egg-shaped shell where we can actually connect to other people and other things. Like when you're sitting in a cafe, you're all by yourself, you might be reading a book, and all of a sudden you get this awareness that somebody might be looking at you, and you turn and somebody is looking at you.
Yes.
That's because energetically there is something happening that we're not perceiving, where that person energetically is tapping us, and then we somehow subconsciously perceive and look over.
Yes.
Or when you're thinking about somebody and they call on the phone, these things are real. We tend to shake them off as just coincidence, but there is real stuff behind that. Anyway, so I'd be sitting at the river watching this leaf, and I would try to get this thread of energy to come and pull the leaf against the current to me. And I would play with that for hours on end over weeks and weeks and weeks. And there were 3 occurrences toward the end where I could actually pull the leaf to me. It would freak me out because I'm thinking, wait, this can't be happening.
Yeah.
But it did. And it was like, whoa, okay, this is real. I do have this capability. We all have this capability. We just don't believe it. We don't practice it. We don't exercise that muscle.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes along with even the Bible talks about it where, again, talking about Christianity, Jesus tells the apostles that, they have that ability to do healing, right, in his name, or just they have the power as long as they believe in it. A lot of Christians will think, oh, that's of the devil. You can't do the woo-woo magical stuff. That's of Satan. But no, that's a God-given gift we all have. We just don't believe it. We don't practice it. And then through massage school, I was in some energy work classes. And again, I'm kind of rolling my eyes at that because I'm thinking most of the people that I know, they're talking about auras and spirits and all that. I'm thinking they're just making it up, right? They're imagining it. It's all placebo. And I wasn't buying it. But I was sitting in class waiting for our instructor for my first, I think it was a Reiki class. And I was there early. And so I'm on my phone screwing around. And next thing I know, all the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. And all the hair on my arm. It's like you're in a thunderstorm, and all of a sudden, the ions get really thick, and you feel the energy.
Yeah, sure.
And then I just felt this pressure wave pushing from behind me. So much so that I had to get up in my chair and turn to look to see what in the heck is back there. It was my instructor coming down the hall. She was still like, yards away. And she came into the room, and it gave me the willies. I'm thinking the power that was coming off of this woman.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. So now she had my attention, right? And she had all of my attention. And so I learned everything I could in that class and a few other classes. And we would work on each other in classes. And so I had experiences that helped me to believe what I was seeing. Like some of the practices we would do, you're rubbing your hands and you're trying to like feel the energy between your hands. And I'm like, at first I'm not feeling anything. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, there is something there. But then I'm thinking, okay, no, it's my imagination. There's got to be a physiological reason why I'm imagining this, because maybe I'm just putting pressure on my arms in here where I'm pushing on some veins, and it's giving me the misperception that I'm feeling something. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to hold one hand perfectly still, and I'm going to just move this hand. And so as I would move this hand, I'm like, oh, holy crap, I can feel that here as a pressure wave when I'm working on that.
Yeah.
And so like now I'm like super fascinated, like I'm feeling this myself. So then we started, like I said, we were working on each other, and I was working on this big muscle-bound dude in class. And it was the middle of winter. It was cold as heck in the room. And I'm working, I'm not even touching him. I've got my hands like, a couple inches over him, like one hand over his head, and he had his hands over his stomach, and so I had one hand over his hands. And I'm doing the intention like we're taught to do, where you're visualizing like a bright light coming down from, and it's from God, the universe, the earth, like whoever you believe your higher power is.
Yeah.
They don't want to freak people out and make it a religious thing. So it's whatever you believe, that's what you go with and you're picturing. So you're picturing this white light coming down through the top of your head, and it's coming through you, out your left hand, through whoever you're working on, back in through your right hand. So you've got this circular flow.
Yeah.
And so I'm working on this guy, and I'm watching him, and it's like watching beads of sweat just pouring off of him.
Whoa.
And when we were done, I asked him, like, what was happening with you? He's like, dude, you were roasting me. I'm like, you're kidding. I'm shivering. I am just cold as AF,
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was just a big ball of sweat.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, that's weird. Again, I'm still not really believing it's me. I'm thinking something was going on with him.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd taken, _Himby or some supplement that was making him sweat so much. But then a girlfriend of mine at the time, her mom was in the hospital. She was in a coma, and my girlfriend left the room with her friend, and it was just me, her mom in bed, and her dad, who happened to be sitting by the monitors, the blood pressure, heart rate, and all that stuff. And I don't know what made me think to try this. It was a bold move. I didn't know these people all that well yet. I was still new to them. But I thought, I'm going to go try some energy work on here. I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
So I just got up and walked over to the bedside, one hand over her forehead, not touching her, another hand over her hands. I just felt this crazy vortex, like pulsing and swirling, coming from her head and her hands. I'm like, this energy was super chaotic. And so I was trying to connect with her and just having the intention. It's all about intention when you're doing this work.
Yeah.
Of stabilizing her energy and trying to signal to her that she needs to come back. Her family needs her. I was getting choked up again thinking about it. Anyway, this stuff just moves me. Anyway.
What about it is so moving to you?
Because it's so real. It's so powerful. It's so raw.
Yeah.
The fact that you can connect with somebody on an energetic level. I'm like, wow, what a wimp. It touches my heart.
Yeah.
And oh shit! So I didn't expect to cry during this.
It's okay. I have that effect on people.
Okay, we'll just say it's time to like check my estrogen level now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm working on her, and I'm going through my intentions, and then as I'm done, I'm like kind of pulling away. I look over at her father, because I'm like, my first thought is I need to apologize to this guy, explain why I'm doing this to his wife. I look over at him, and his eyes are huge, and he says, "How did you learn to do that?" And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I was watching the monitors when you started. He goes, I saw everything change. He goes, and I knew when you were pulling away because I started to see things normalize and come back to where they were before. And I'm like, holy shit, really? You could measure that? You were seeing that?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wow, that's bizarre. And now I'm like believing a little more that I was actually having an impact on her. And then my third experience was I took an equine massage class where we were massaging horses. Okay, and so there's each one of us students, we go out to this, what do you call a horse stable?
Horse stable.
Horse stable, whatever you call it. We're there, and this one girl got paired up with a colt. And this colt was not paying attention at all. I mean, it was a really young horse. It just wanted to chase butterflies and jump all over the place. And she couldn't get the horse to hold still for her to work on. And so the owner says, do any of you know how to do energy work? And I didn't say anything right away because I was just learned it, right? I was going to wait somebody that really knew what they were doing to say, oh, yeah. And I was going to let them do it. But then nobody spoke up. And I said, well, I've had the class. She said, okay, good. You take the colt. She brought the colt over to me. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is not going to work because this thing was just all over the place. It's like a puppy. You know, you can't control it at all. She's like, just, do your hands, go into your intention, and you'll see. And I'm like, yeah, okay, right. And so, I put one hand on the horse's neck and the other one on its rump. And I started my intention, and the horse just stopped. It just stood there. And then it was just the two of us. The flow was just so smooth. It was just beautiful. It was like the most loving, I don't want to get emotional again. Yeah, it was just like the most amazing experience I ever felt.
Yeah.
Like we were one.
Yeah.
And everybody stopped what they were doing because they were watching. And at one point, I got a little self-conscious because I realized how quiet it was.
Yeah.
And that everybody was watching us. And when I got self-conscious, I started to lose my connection. And then, of course, the colt just started trotting up, taking off again.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that, there's no placebo there, right? The
Yeah.
colt doesn't know it's supposed to like energy work.
Yeah.
Nobody could teach the colt to do that. It just liked it.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all those stories. I think it's really important for someone like you who has the constitution that you have to share a perspective like that, because I think it's going to open a lot of people's minds about what's available and what's possible.
I hope so, because most people just deny this stuff, but you got to open yourself to believing things that you wouldn't normally. There's a whole big world out there we don't understand yet. And
in that same vein, as we're wrapping up, what final words would you have to someone who's on this health journey, who's trying to just be as healthy as they can for as long as they can? What would you tell that person, knowing what you know now, talking about the testing, talking about the basics, talking about the energy work? What do you think is the most impactful thing that someone could hear right now that would help them really be inspired to follow through and commit at the highest level to their own personal health, but also, the health of those around them?
Yeah. I'd say don't beat yourself up over it. Do your best every day. But if you do a McDonald's once, if you do a Taco Bell once, or you go do pizza once a month, it's not going to kill you, right? That's not poison. It's not good for you. You don't want to do that all the time. But if you're at a birthday party and there's some cake, maybe enjoy a piece of cake.
Eat the cake.
Right? Eat the cake.
Yeah.
Enjoy a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. But don't stress over it. And again, don't give up a workout. I mean, don't give up a chance to go out with friends and be with people you care about just because you have to go do a workout or be really rigid. Try to automate stuff, make it, just a habit so you don't have to think about it. Free yourself to do, bigger and better things. Yeah, because my perspective of you is that although it is a huge part of your identity, it is not all who you are. Exactly. It's just really, to me, it's just a tiny part. Yeah. It's just one more experiment that I'm running amongst many other things in my life.
Cool. Well, we'll have to do another podcast to explore some of those other experiments. I'd be super curious to dig into those. But thank you so much for your time, Dave, and I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much for those great questions. I don't think anybody's ever asked me about any of those things on a podcast before.
Good.
So I really appreciate the chance to talk about those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.